And I really used to enjoy hearing in the Mass the readings about the bad shepherds. I was always filled with a sense of self-righteous indignation whenever I was in the pews. That all changed the moment I got ordained to be a priest. It's like, dang, now I'm in that group. I'm part of it. So instead of talking about shepherds, I thought I'd save face and focus on coping mechanisms. Where we go to handle our stress, our suffering in life. Because in a very real sense, the shepherds we have in our life are the people or things that we go to when we're suffering. That's when we need a shepherd. When we're in the dark valley, when we don't understand what's going on in our life. And the person that we go to or the place that we go to really reveals who I'm looking to guide my life. Christ found the people in today's gospel in a deserted place. And he saw their pain. He saw their suffering. And he came to shepherd them right there. So it really makes us ask the question, where do I go with my desolations? Where do I go? What's my first instinct to do with my suffering and anxieties, my fears? I'll never forget this moment in seminary. I'd been in seminary for like 6 years studying to be a priest. Daily Mass, daily adoration, daily rosary, spiritual reading. I mean, I should have been a living saint by then. Didn't quite work out that way. That's why I had such a long formation, like 10 years. But I just remember this really bad week. Everything kept falling down one after the other. And there's this one day where I was just getting so frustrated. I was in the middle of class. I got so mad at some things that were being taught and said and spoken about that I got up in the middle of class and I just walked out. And I had this most familiar, overwhelming urge rise up in me of what I needed to do at that moment, without a doubt. To go to the chapel and pray? No. To pray the rosary? No. To offer it up and make it a sacrifice to our Lord? No. It was to listen to my favorite rapper, Tupac Shakur. I thought of it that moment. I'm like, I've been in seminary for a long time, all right? I should be past Tupac by now. But no, that's all I wanted was to listen to his voice. And that's because growing up, whenever I was going through a hard time in football, in sports, with friends, with family, Tupac was there. And it was always rap music that I went to like strengthen me to get through that, just like grit and bear it, And so our coping mechanisms from when we're younger, those don't just go away. They come back again and again. And we get to see really how much do I still respond to this. So but what we notice is that bad coping mechanisms often leave us empty. It's a temporary relief, or it distracts us from the pain for a moment, gives us an outlet. But the real question is, how do I feel when it's all over? That's how we discern between what are the good coping mechanisms that we go to and what are the bad. How does it leave me in the end? So that's why the question is so important. What do you do with your deserted places when you feel sad, upset, or confused? Because that's who your shepherd is. That's who's guiding you. The one we look to when we're suffering. And what I've noticed is that our temptation in life, our principal temptation, is to look for another shepherd, another idol, a false refuge to go to in our sufferings to give us a semblance of security, of hope, of faith, of strength in the present moment. And that's really what sin is. Sin comes from the root word harmatuia in Hebrew, but it means to miss the mark, like an archer. Right? When you miss the mark, you sinned. And so we sin when we go to the wrong places to deal with our desolations and our sufferings. And that could be food, could be television, especially for us in our day, it could be social media, oftentimes pornography or alcohol, and things that offer us a temporary rush that can never actually fill the deserted places in our life. It just distracts us for a moment. And that's how we also get addictions in our life. Right? Because those things that are false idols, false shepherds, we can never get enough of. We have to keep going back again and again and again in order to keep up that high and get more of it. And that's where the addictions develop. So Christ is our shepherd when he is the first one that we go to when we're in confusion, when we're suffering, when we're in a desolate area. His voice is the voice that guides me through it. He tells me what to think. He tells me what to do and what not to do. But our temptation in this life, even after 6 years of seminary, even as a priest, all of our life is to look for a false shepherd, something usually more tangible that I can hold on to in order to get me through my sufferings. I was thinking about this last Friday when the Vatican published a motu proprio, right? A new motu proprio that's going to greatly limit the celebration of the Tridentine Mass in the church. If you don't know what the Tridentine Mass is, don't worry about it. It won't affect you too much. But for those of us who are affiliated with it or do have a love or devotion to the Tridentine Mass, it was quite shocking news. First temptation I had in that morning, listen to some Tupac. Second temptation was to go to the news, to find out, what is everybody else saying? What's everyone saying about how we should interpret this information? And one thing I've come to understand is where you first want to go with your suffering is usually a revelation of the false idol. Whether it's people, social media, Facebook, CNN, or Fox, whatever on YouTube, it's like, where do I go to decipher how I should deal with information? And my point is not to talk about the motu proprio itself. That's the church has spoken and we follow. That's it. I'm not trying to dictate what's right or wrong here. We follow the church no matter what. But what we do with that information, that's what's important. Because my error, the first moment when I heard that news, was I need to go on the news and find out how to think about this. No. I need to go to Jesus Christ at that moment in my prayer to try to understand this. And something I've come to see over and over again is the way that the news tells me to think about something, the way YouTube tells me to think about something in social media and Facebook, is often very different from the way Jesus Christ in my prayer tells me how to think about something. The effects are very different. Oftentimes when I'm upset and I get on the news on YouTube, I come away even more angry, self-justified, and critical, or afraid, or depressed. And yet I can take the same information to Jesus Christ in the tabernacle and come away feeling a sense of peace, hope, and joy in his presence. So it's not about the information in itself, it's what do I do to process the different information that comes into my life. Where do I go? Because that's showing us who is my shepherd in my life. That's why I think that our goal in life is actually to become more and more poor. Why to become more and more poor? Because in our poverty, we learn to depend on Jesus Christ alone, to truly experience him as our shepherd. And when Jesus Christ is your shepherd, when Jesus Christ is the one who guides you in your suffering, that's the one person that can never fail us, no matter what. And oftentimes, the idols that we build up crumble beneath us. Whether it's a relationship. The reason that we have so many divorces in our time, it's kind of interesting that we've never held human love at a higher standard. It's like the salvation of man. And yet at the same time, divorce is higher than it's ever been. Nobody wants to get married anymore. And most relationships end within a year. Why? Well, whatever you idolize crumbles beneath you. So if I look at a human love to be the total answer, to be my shepherd, I'm going to put a weight on that other person that they can't carry. And it ends up going to destroy the very thing I look to love, to save me. Same thing with politics. The more we talk about politics, the more politics becomes divisive and corrupted in our own self. Why? Because we're looking for a political party to save us. Doesn't matter if you're left or right on that. And the same thing can happen in liturgy. Because it's usually what you most love is what you look to be your shepherd in this life. It's like you're going to be the thing that saves me when I'm suffering. You're going to be the one I go to in my places of confusion. And you're going to offer me a security and a peace within it. And if that's the case, if the liturgy itself is being divisive, it needs to crumble. Everything needs to crumble except for Jesus Christ. Because the goal of every one of our life is that I need nothing except Jesus Christ and his word, his voice speaking to me and guiding me through. because that's the only foundation that can endure. Anyone who says the salvation of the church is in a specific liturgy has fallen into idol worship. That's been a hard lesson for me to learn because I'm a priest. So there's few things I love more in life than liturgy. What I've come to see over and over again is Christ's main goal is to make me love him and his presence more than any liturgy, more than any church, more than any place. So we all have to ask ourselves that question. Like, number one, pay attention to what you most love, because it's usually what you most love that will cause you the most desolations, right? And then within that, where do you go when you're suffering? What are the coping mechanisms that naturally come up in you, whether it's be certain relationships or alcohol, pornography, or a specific, way of worshiping God that isn't actually helping you to grow closer to him? What do we do with the deserted places in our life, our suffering? Christ is the one who comes over and over again to find us in the deserted places in our lives, in this world, and more than anywhere else, in his church. It doesn't matter how much brokenness would ever be in the Catholic Church. In every single Mass that is celebrated, no matter where it is, no matter what it is, no matter who the priests are, who the people are, when it's done correctly, Jesus Christ himself comes on this very altar as our good shepherd, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Holy Eucharist. And when we can see that, no matter what we're going through in our life, we will always have what we need to get through whatever suffering we might endure. We will truly be able to say with the psalmist, "The Lord is my shepherd, and there is absolutely nothing that I shall want."